All right, we live. So
We live.
yeah, yeah, man, it was. I felt like it was a really good, little mini series we did. Kind of rounding up with Seven Deadly Sins last week. I know we'll kind of revisit that because I feel like Nate said, that that's always kind of going to be a reoccurring theme. In all aspects of life, our culture, and that type of stuff. Today, I just kind of wanted to for the viewers, just kind of touch on, a little bit of each of our testimonies, why we came from Christ, any kind of struggles, why we might have came back to Christ, just, whatever you guys want to put on your heart. I'll try not to get too emotional. Sometimes I get emotional when it comes to my God, based on
Ultimate.
people that know my story. So I just preface that on the front end, because this is a real thing to me. This is a real thing to us, when it comes on this life journey. So, anybody want to kick that thing off?
Hey, you gotta go, Nate. Hey, you gotta go, Nate.
or am I got to kick it off?
Hey, look, you feel led? Go ahead.
We're gonna have to,
Yeah,
we're gonna
yeah.
have to, we're gonna have to rock paper scissors for it, like the
Hey,
kids
Hey,
do.
right.
look.
I mean, I could kick it off.
Yes, sir.
For for me, I mean, my story is my story is a little bit different in that regard. I grew up in the church. I came from the church. My family lineage is the church. My grandfather on my father's side ran one of the largest Baptist church in Columbus, Ohio. That's where my father grew up into and was raised. My grandfather's children, from his family, that he had with my father, anyways. My father, my uncle, they both became pastors. My uncle my uncle runs the largest Baptist church in Brooklyn, New York. So he's definitely been putting in his time spreading the word. My father used to, as a kid, I used to see him preach, which was a great example for me. I got to see it all the time, and it was one of the proudest moments of my life. My father was also a doctor, which was also a proud moment to see my father, work with patients. But to see my father get up on the podium, so to speak, and preach and really spread the word, and to listen and to look at the congregation and the way that they amplified everything he said, and testified with them. I mean, it was moving. As a child, your parents are always your superheroes. They always are. But when you get to see your parents doing things of positivity in the community, spreading words and giving hope and joy, it's always refreshing. It's always a badge of honor. That being said, my father, Baptist preacher, my mother an avid Catholic, and I got exposed to lots of different versions of Christianity, my entire life. One thing that my parents did that may have been different from most Christian upbringings is that they really wanted me to experience it, for myself, and really decide which path the Christianity gave me, the most solace in the inside, the most internal peace, the greatest connection. I went to I went to multiple Christian churches, growing up from different denominations, and seeing how different people spread their worship, and also the slight differences between the denominations, which really, it's crazy to think that there are so many differences, but there are. So it's crazy because I as a parent now, life is always about reflection, and I think about having those choices and having those times, and also having that space and opportunity. And I think I talked about it before. I found my way into a great relationship with my creator. I've also allowed the world to pull me out of that, and found my way not into not having a relationship with my creator, but to unintentionally or intentionally not acknowledging it on a daily basis, just to get through the day, and to to operate in the hands of man, if you would, to try to play the game of the world. My testament, I guess, is a little different in the sense, whereas I was born in the church, and through bad decisions, and space and opportunity, I made the decision to separate myself, from the church, and it happened multiple times throughout my adolescence, and it also happened throughout my adulthood, and for lots of different reasons. It's crazy when you think about it. One of my biggest obstacles as far as my learning, my development, my growth was when I took a class in college called Western Civilization, and the way they explain religion, as a whole, honestly, it didn't sit right with me, and it created a tailspin of doubt, and a tailspin of inconsistency, and me trying to do research to prove my own conspiracies, and understanding, and it also created confusion, and I think that confusion is the devil's playground, if you would, because when you're in a situation of confusion, then you can make mistakes, and you can make mistakes based on feelings. You can make mistakes based on perceived observations in the moment, but no longer based on a fundamental understanding of how you agreed to live your life. We talked about, internal integrity, which I think is the most important integrity. But I think when you have confusion, it creates an easy opportunity to dilute that integrity, and to change what you're about. And what I've seen is, especially in society, we've talked about it. I think that faith as a whole is infiltrated on multiple different levels now in society, through our entertainment, through our education, through our politics. You name it. I mean, there's so many ways that they can create doubt if you take the bait, if you don't have a fundamental understanding and integrity about who you are, what you follow, and why you believe. I think my testament to my faith is that, even with being a sinner, even with being somebody who hasn't been, steadhold, his entire life to just keep in track with the word, um, God always welcomes you home, and when you know right is right, and you know wrong is wrong, and you know the fundamental understandings of the word, even when you make a decision not to necessarily act on it, or not to necessarily live in accordance to how you should be living, you always feel in the back of your heart, in the back of your mind, that it's not right. You always feel that, and even if you can convince yourself on a temporary basis, um, to do what's not right for whatever reason you've justified it, I feel like somebody with true faith and true fundamentals and those true principles, they still know. And I think that was me. That was God talking to me, if you would, by saying, it's okay. I understand I understand what you're doing. I understand why you're doing it, but God gave me the space, and honestly the grace to try those trials and tribulations, to come back, and to be accepted, with open arms, to be all forgiving. I think a lot of times, people look at Christianity from the outside, and then they talk about, being able to repent and being relieved of sins, and they kind of mock it because they don't understand. But from a personal level, to me, that's the greatness of the Son of God. That's why Jesus was put here. That was the test. We had somebody who was not a sinner, who lived the correct way, who was strong and fought all the world's temptations, and still put themselves out there to suffer, for the mistakes and the future mistakes that we're going to make. The fact of the matter that 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 happened, the fact of the matter that, it was already taken into account that we're not going to be perfect, that we're going to make mistakes, but the price has already been paid, so there doesn't have to be future sacrifices. The greatest sacrifice had already happened. And I look at that as not an excuse to continue to make mistakes and to continue to knowingly sin, but as a justification, and an honest to God reason to say that's why it's okay to forgive yourself, and move forward. Move forward. I really believe that we're put on this earth to move forward and strive to be better every single day. Not not to literally live in yesterday's mistakes and regrets. And when you talk about my connection to my Creator, my belief and my faith in Jesus, I mean, that is a representation that I live by. The sins have been paid for. The greatest sacrifice was given up, and given up for people like myself who are going to make mistakes, and who want to rectify it, who want to fix it. But ultimately, I think that when you've come to the level of understanding, and you realize that, listen, the world will pull you. If you need it, finite, if you needed finite proof to have belief, then you wouldn't have belief. That's not belief. That's proof. That's what you can see with your eyes. Belief is, in my opinion, having the faith, and the knowing that something is, even when the proof isn't present. Because that's, and honestly, that's our God-given power. No other creature on this world can believe. They're instinctual. They see it, it's there, they act, that's it. We've been given the power to believe, and that's a strong power that comes with a lot of great gifts. And if not used correctly, it can also be used to your detriment, because we have the power to believe, and we can believe in a connection with our higher power to elevate ourselves, to fulfill our true purpose. Or unfortunately, we can get caught in the world's lies, and we can believe in a negative way, which will lead to our detriment. I truly believe everybody is where they're intending to be, whether they know they intend to be there or not. So I'm sure I'm going to have more to say once you gentlemen jump in, but I think that's my little kickoff.
I like
Hey,
it. I
great,
like
great
it. I
testimony.
like it. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, you good?
Good, good. Hey, I'll go ahead and go next. In terms of um, my me coming to Christ, my story is, I think all of our stories will be the same, and I'll tell you why that is. It'll be the same but different. Here I was a kid that was born to two teenage parents. All right. So, my first 8 years of my life, in my opinion, were, I didn't know it at the time, but there was a lot of dysfunction going on. So I'll just put it like this. I was born to two teenage parents, Eastside Phoenix, in the projects. My mom and my father were very young when they had me, never married. So looking at that scenario, I was already, from a worldly standpoint, behind the gun, so to speak, having two young parents. But one thing I wanted to share just really quick before I continue with my story is I pulled a quote that I want you guys to see, and you guys have probably seen it before. Um, can you guys see that? Well, hold on.
Oh yeah.
Let me move this video.
See ya.
So before I was formed in the womb, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you before you were born. I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Jeremiah 1:5. And so to kind of continue on with my story is to say that, for me, I got thrust into a culture. I grew up in a, I grew up in a Baptist church. I grew up in a church called Pilgrim's Rest, and I would like to say that my families were church going folks, so to speak, on both sides. My dad's side of the family, my mom's side of the family. Both families lived, in the East Side projects. It was an environment that was it was an environment that was dangerous. Let's just put it that way. It was a lot of fighting amongst families. We lived on the main strip of a road called Van Buren, which had a lot of prostitution. There was drugs, there was violence. Just like I said, not a good environment for anyone, let alone a young child. So I was put into a situation, in my personal opinion, where there was times that I was forced into only having God as the only option. Being in a family that was, going to church. And the thing that was crazy about in that environment is there was a lot of great people, a lot of great families. You know what I mean? People were just struggling, hurt by different means. And so, I was in that environment till I was about kindergarten, age 5 or 6. And then my mom had married my stepfather. We moved away for a couple years. I should say, yeah, we moved to Colorado. He was a military guy. Their marriage was dysfunctional, at times, especially when he drank alcohol. Um, and so, as a young child, me and my younger sister at the time, we had to endure, listening to parents fight and different things like that. Physically, they broke up for a little while. I even, spent about a couple weeks in foster care for a little while, not necessarily because of the attitude and temperament they had towards each other, because, on a military base, especially during that time in the 80s, whatnot, you couldn't just leave your child and not have any supervision. And I just remember my mom leaving with my stepdad to go and go out to wherever, and the military police came by and took us in foster care. And anyway, kind of fast forward about how I really really came to Christ and having an understanding, because I moved back to Phoenix probably when I was getting ready to start 3rd grade. Still right back in the projects, actually living with my aunt, my mom, all in one apartment. And the weird thing about it is all the stuff that was always going on, the drugs, the violence, the toxic culture, you know, I always kind of felt this peace, around me. I never, even with everything that was going on, I never really felt scared. I never got touched. When I say I never got touched, I never got hurt. But I didn't know it then. But God was always already walking with me, during this time frame. I didn't really fundamentally understand that till I got older. Like when I started to think about the thought processes that I had as a third grade kid, there just weren't normal thought processes, and the only account I could have for that is God. So what I mean by that is just having discernment over decision making. um, Being able to see situations. Outside of my grandfather, being an alcoholic and dying of cirrhosis of the liver. There's many other reasons why I don't touch alcohol, because I learned it at a young age. I learned very quickly. God showed me very quickly that, alcohol in terms of that early environment for me was not something you want to be involved in. So that's why I never touched alcohol because the only thing I ever saw around alcohol was negativity. God showed me at a very young age, and like I said, just having discernment at a young age, that being Black in America was two different Americas. And so like I said, I didn't fundamentally understand that till I got older. Those some of those thought process that was given to me, and the only way that I can really say that I was even in that mold, because I have an 8-year-old and I know how his mind works, and I know that my 8-year-old didn't have some of those thoughts that I had. And the only account that I can have for that is God, is the Holy Spirit, being able to come over me. So, the thing about it that, I never, even though I was going to the church, I never had anybody that really sat me down and gave me the word, you know what I mean? Made me read a Bible, gave me verses or anything like that. So when I say that I kind of always had Christ holding me or in my life, he just always kind of been there. You know what I mean? When I say that I got kind of put into a situation where God was the only thing that I had, that is true. You know what I'm saying? Being some of the things that I had seen, you know, by the time I was 8, between drug dealing and violence. And I just remember walking home from school. See, when you live in the projects in Eastside Phoenix, there was no busing system. You see what I'm saying? We had to
Right.
walk. And when I said we had to walk, I'm talking about 3-4 miles. And if you guys know anything about that Phoenix heat, it is no joke. And we literally would go from the Dupervilla projects to the Sydney Peach projects, and then we had a project called the Pickle Projects because it was by a pickle factory. We literally would pick up kids along the way, drop off kids, as we came back. And the things that we were subjected to, I just, one of the stories I always share is like, I just remember seeing, a dead body, me and my friends seeing a dead body just laying in the alley. But once again, it's not even about that. It's not a sob story. It's the story that when I endured and saw so much stuff, through the age of 8, going into 9 as I was finishing up 3rd grade, what I realized is God was always there, because I was never given the word. I had already believed in God and had a belief in God before I even really knew what that meant.
Right.
Thank God for my my grandmother, who was the matriarch of the family. um, you know I'm very fortunate to still have her around, because she basically, the grandfather that I was talking about that, passed away. um, she basically left Arkansas. That's where my mom's side of the family is. She basically left Arkansas, moved to Phoenix with four kids as a single mom. So, I mean, you can imagine what that was like, back in that day where, the civil rights thing wasn't really, it was kicking off, and it was just a lot going on. So for me, I learned very quickly with discernment from the Holy Ghost and God, when I look back on it. One of the stories that I share is I remember when my grandfather passed away, my mom's dad. And I just remember being young, and I remember my mom saying that, I don't remember if she phrased it as God or if she phrased it as an angel, came to her when she was sleeping and said that, hey, if your father, her father, my grandfather, doesn't stop drinking within a year, the Lord is going to take his life.
Mm.
And a year later to the day, my grandfather passed away of cirrhosis of the liver. And so, for me, there was a lot of instances, for time purposes, given the highlights. But, what we're trying to say is, I've always been, I've always felt like I've been a child of God.
Right.
Now, kind of echoing what Nate says, I got thrust into a culture where, um, I don't want to say it's not popular, but we've kind of defined our own laws and rules within the laws and rules when it came to
Right.
God. So I never touched alcohol. I never touched drugs because, like I said, I came from an environment where God showed me real quick, this is not what you want to do. My father, who I have a great relationship with, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, strong Christian, deacon of his church, that type of thing. But unfortunately, I didn't grow up in my father's household. My father left to go off to the Navy when he was, about to turn 18. I think they let you in at that time. So, he was gone, for a few of those early years of my life while, he was stationed out in Virginia, and then he came back probably around when I was 2nd, 3rd grade. So I didn't have that direct influence on him, or from him, I should say. Um, and the moral of the story is there was a lot of stuff going on, and both of our families got out of those situations. In terms of that environment, government housing, that type of thing. But as I went through my teens, God kept showing up in my life. You know what I mean? I remember going from a predominantly Black neighborhood to moving in 4th grade to a predominantly white neighborhood, out to more of a suburban area, even though we were living in Section 8. And I just remember, you guys can visualize being a young kid that goes from all Black kids around them and brown kids around them to all of a sudden it's completely flipped. It's like 90-10. You talk about culture shock. You talk about going from dysfunction, and there was always something inside of me that said, man, this can't be it. You know what I'm saying? Like, to the point where things were so dysfunctional that it became normal. And then when I got on the outs, when God pulled me and moved me on the outside, it was like a totally different thing. And so that's that. I don't, when I look back on that, it built me a certain type of way. He was building me a certain type of way, refining me a certain type of way to get ready for the world. You know what I'm saying? He gave me a certain type of strength. I was joking with my wife, and I said, man, people don't understand, the 8-year-old version of me is stronger than most adults. I promise you.
Right.
Just because what God allowed me to endure, and what God did, he humbled me early. He humbled me early. He gave me gratitude early, because he showed me from going from the one environment to a completely different environment. And I remember going into 4th grade, and I started to make some friends. And I remember, this white kid came up to me, and we were like recess doing something. This is early in the year, and the kid was just in regular language. I don't even think in like even like a malicious type of way, but he called me an N. You know what I mean? And I promise you, as God is my witness, you know, where I came from, that would be immediate. Let's throw hands. You know what I'm saying? That would be immediate. But
Right.
what God did in that moment, and that gave me discernment, is the Holy Ghost, I swear, came over me and said, don't even react. All right. And so I just act like he didn't even say it. In other words, I gave that word no power. And that was, one of many introductions to, well, let me finish the story. So, my buddies actually stepped in, was like, nah, this, that, and the other. But what I found out quickly was that was my first lesson in learning of, being able to control your emotions and not giving people your power. You see what I'm saying? And like I
Yes.
said, I wasn't able to articulate those thoughts and those feelings as a 4th grader. But as I grew up, and God was continuously showing me how the world works, when I became an all-state athlete, he showed me how, people would treat another person of color different. They would treat me different because they looked at me as a commodity. I had value because I was good at sports. You see what I'm saying? And even so, moving forward, and I'll wrap up, even being an all city athlete, playing football, playing basketball, ran track. Football was my mainstay. I was always kind of a roughneck, so I kind of gravitated more towards football, because it was always my equalizer. It was always my place that I felt like I was equal to everybody else, or better in a sense, because it had nothing to do with finances. It had nothing to do with where you lived. Had nothing to. It was just mano a mano, and it was my opportunity where I could prove, quote unquote, my value. It was my opportunity that I could get out anger and frustration, because there was a lot of things that between, my early years in high school, I had a lot of relatives pass away to the point where,
Right.
I lost both grandfathers. I lost a grandmother. I lost a aunt, a great aunt. I just lost a lot of people in a short period of time, and I always felt like God was still there, you know but I really didn't have any I didn't really, in my opinion, looking back, I didn't really have any true direction. I believed in God, but I didn't really have any true direction, because as we all know, you get thrust into a culture that says, do this, do that, this is good, this is not good. And like I said, you come in with your own levels of, what you should do. And even being in, I played tailback and defensive back in high school, and I was a first team all state athlete. And I didn't go to a football school. We weren't known for football. We were really known for basketball. We had an average football team. And as I closed on my senior year, even with the accolades, I didn't have one Division I offer at that time. And when I say not one, not one. And my thing is like, how can I be in Phoenix, Arizona, be one of the top guys. I had grades, so it wasn't grades, but I'm gonna tell you how God worked it out. Had a coach who was a former alumni who was probably maybe 8 years older than me or so, found out that I had no offers. And I ended up getting an offer to actually go to junior college, and got coached by a guy named Joe Kirsting. And I had schools that wanted me, but they wanted me to walk on. And come on, man, I was I was on Section 8, on food stamps, the whole nine. I didn't have no college money. You know what I'm saying? My thought process was like, man, let's just be the first generation to get there. And so they found out I was still available. And when I got to junior college, I was fortunate to come into contact with a lot of the other guys. I found out there was about 13 other kids that were on that squad that were also all-state athletes who didn't get offered, which I thought was crazy to me. But God worked it out, man. I spent a year at junior college, proved my worth, really a year and a half before I transferred to D1 school. And just all kind of worked itself out. My first Division I offer was University of Minnesota, Big Ten. And it's hard to get a 19-year-old kid away from Arizona to go to a school that's 1 in 10 in the cold.
Right.
So I opted to go to a smaller Division I school in Western Illinois. But the whole point is God kept showing up and kept trying to pull me, get me in, get me in, get me in. As I left to go to college, my mom actually gave me a Bible. You know what I mean? As I went off to college, but it wasn't even a full Bible, man. It was like just the New Testament. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It was like
Right.
this big. But that was like my thing, you know what I'm saying? Because I was trying to figure it out. Like I said, even though I had a great
Yeah.
relationship with my father, I didn't really have the direction. So I was trying to figure it out. And same thing with you, Nate. Like, I did, like I said, man, I wasn't a person that drank, never, didn't do drugs, didn't smoke, didn't do any of that. But my shortcomings always came in. It was weird. It was always like the culture that we're thrust into is like, chasing girls was the norm. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
Right.
finding different ways to sin. And it was in my opinion, when I was in the culture of my guys, because it's such a macho thing when you're playing football. There's so many socially accepted things that go on, especially when you're like, oh, you're young, you're at college, let's do this. You know what I mean? So always in the back of my
Right.
mind, I knew that there were certain things that like, hey, you really shouldn't engage in that. But it was just like so culturally accepted that you just roll with it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. You're 19, you're 20, you're 21, whatever, whatever. And then, that even carried on, after uh um after college. And I think now looking back on it, when I look at the three opportunities I had with the NFL, it was a blessing that I didn't make it. You know what I mean? When I look back at it, and I know a lot of people probably say that's crazy, because I'll tell you that story. When I finished college, I got invited to the NFL Regional Combine. So when I got there, there was guys from all Big Ten schools just everywhere. And prior to going to that combine, let me show you how God works. And this is why, prior to going to that combine, I got hurt on some fluke stuff. I was literally just standing around. Uh, and my buddy was shooting some free throws, and we were just talking. I just jumped up to get a rebound to, give him the back, shoot him the ball back, and I landed on my buddy's ankle and sprained my ankle. So as a defensive back with no side to side, I showed up at the combine. I was a 4-4 guy. You know what I mean? But I didn't have the side to side, and I didn't get signed. So I ended up finishing up my school, got my degree, ended up going to a workout later on that year, for St. Louis for their arena football, for their professional arena football team. And they brought in 150 guys. And there was only out of those 150 they brought in, they only signed two guys, me and a guy named Kerry Hayes out of Western Carolina. But anyway, God showed up. And then I had my opening 2 great years in the Arena Football League put me in position to get a workout with the Saints. Never materialized, even though I had a great workout. And then I had my agent called me up and said that 49ers were signing me. And then as I was getting ready to literally sign on the dotted line to go out there to play, this is 2 years in, you know, at that time, the NFL came out with the free agent cap limit. So that kind of killed that. So it was like 3 strikes were out. So I went back and finished my career in the Arena Football League. But you know, God showed up in so many ways in my life, and it really took for me to get out of that realm, that world, you know, to I think really start to get myself closer and closer to God once I got out of that culture of sports, because there's just so much that is thrown at you, that's given to you, that's accessible to you. And so that's kind of my mini story of, you know, my testament. I got baptized officially in 2004, you know, when I was living in Maryland. But it was, you know, me in terms of prayer, I was always a person that was praying. But in terms of really studying and try to have an understanding of the Bible and that relationship, it really didn't materialize until I hit 30. And then it just kind of slowly grown, you know, from there, and having discernment and having an understanding and having reflection on, you know, why my life the way it was. But that's the short version of how I came to Christ. So, you know, for any of those, you know, new believers, it's never too late for sure. You know, obviously early is better, but early is definitely better. You know, we talked about last year, it's always information and application. It's never about age in terms of maturity. So get to the word. But that's my time, man. I think I went a little bit over, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys that version, the short version of some of those steps and how I came to Christ. BK, my brother, it's on you.
Hey man, so you know, before I even get into it, you know, it's definitely good hearing y'all story. I think I think the first time I've ever heard both of you guys, you know, go into detail like that about your life and its journey. And you also stated how there's, you know, a lot of similarities that you know, get us or have gotten us into, you know, following Christ. So I just kind of tell a little backstory here. You know, my mom at the time when I was born already had 2 kids. She was a teenage mother. She had 2 kids in her teenage years. Then she had me, of course, when she was 20 years old. You know, I was born in Pokey, Florida. Not a great place to live. You know, very low in poverty. You know, on the poverty level. Moved over to Belglade. Then from there, Section 8 housing in West Palm Beach. And you know, my mom went through, you know, abusive relationships. You know, growing up. I didn't know much about many of them, but I knew that my mom would be heard. And, you know, I as the person that I am, you know, in the heart that God's blessed me with, I would sometimes share some of that pain, you know, that she endured. And it actually brought our relationship closer because of those things. Now, when we moved from West Palm to Riviera Beach, which, you know, you pull the numbers up, you know, high murder rate, violence, it's just all around. And even when I look at life now, it's almost like how Watha was saying, it's like God was always around. You know, never got into gangs, never was on drugs, never did any of those things, but I always knew that God was around. So I'll say I was about 6 or 7 years old, or just turning 7. And my mom, you know, it's like, hey, you know, I'm going to Bible Way Church, which is in Pleasant City. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go with you, right? You know, my other siblings, they're like, you know, I don't know, I'll pass on it. But to my mom, and this is where, you know, I think the level, I believe it shifted. My family on my mom's side, my mom is literally first generation, you know, full-fledged Christian, first generation. My dad's side, my grandmother, my grandfather, you know, both Christians. But for some reason, I never really got into detail. They shared 2 separate churches. You know, my grandmother went to Shiloh Baptist Church, and my grandfather went to Mount Zion, if I'm not mistaken. That could be incorrect information there. but we went to two separate churches. My mom and my dad were not married at all. It was a relationship. And then, of course, I was conceived through a short-term relationship, and what many would consider a bastard child. So I went through those things, and basically it was a split. And my mom at that point she was the one that I believe kept me safe. And so when she said she was going to church, I said, I'll follow you. And I remember being in Bible study at Bible Way, and I would learn information, and it began to be exciting for me. It was always constant, new constant information. And I remember getting excited just to answer a question. It would be like, hey, Bernard, who is this? And I'll raise my hand and I would get excited, and she would start calling on me. And I said, well, this is fun. Like, I'm learning more and more about God. And it got to a point that it wasn't so much fun. It was a relationship. I formed a relationship with God. So if you say, well, how do you get it? Well, I went there based on my influence. My mom was my influence. I got to church on my influence. And through that influence, I built a relationship with God. At 7 years old, I decided to get saved and baptized at 7 years old. And I'll tell you, even in that church, people used to always say, you got to be a little pastor. You got to be a little pastor. And, it was definitely, it was cool to hear that when I was a kid, 7 years old. And from 7 years old, my mom decided that she would leave Bible Way and go to the church that raised me as a young believer, which is Miracle Revival Church in Riviera Beach. And my mom would always be in church, and it's almost like she was leading me. When I look at our roles now, even U.S. Health Advisor, she was a leader way back then and really didn't know it. And I'll tell you, not only just God, but my mom always made sure that I was busy. I remember playing football at 11 or 12 years old, and they told me it was going to be like $65. And I'm like, I know my mom don't have it. I'm in practice for like 2-3 weeks, and they come up to me and they say, hey, where's your $65? I said, my mom didn't pay you? They're like, no. And I'm like, I can't tell you anything. I don't know where her stash is. I can't tell you that she can pay you $65. And well, lo and behold, I kept playing in that season, and that 65 wasn't paid, but I was still able to play in those things. But what my mom gave me was an opportunity to consistently be in sports. Also, not only that, I was always in church. I tell people Monday through Friday, I was playing sports. Saturday and Sunday, I was definitely in church. Saturday was choir rehearsal, and Sunday I was in church, singing in the choir, leading a song, doing things in the youth, for the youth department. But that's where I think I grew as a young Christian man. But I'll tell people, as far as the, testimony on it, it wasn't always peachy and creamy. Sometimes being a church boy, it can be corny sometimes, right? You don't do everything that everybody else do. I used to have to beg my mom to go to one of the teenage parties, and she'd be like, no, baby. I'm like, Mom, like, everybody else is going to the parties, let me go. My sister's going, why can't I go? And it was like, even without her really knowing, she was protecting me, right? So I would go to those parties, but for some reason I couldn't get too deep into them. I would go to the party, and I would have to go for a couple of months. I don't have the urge, but I thank you for letting me go. But one thing that I witnessed with my mom was, and my stepfather came in the early 2000s. And my stepfather, for those that don't know, and people listening to it now, was that my stepfather, came from prison, and he served 7 years in prison on an attempted murder charge. But when he came out, him and my mom, ended up being together. But I tell you, for a guy that came from those areas, one of the most loving guys you'll ever meet. Still to this day, it's hard for me even to call him stepdad, but he stepped in when my dad was absent and gave me everything a father could give me. Never tried to turn me on to drugs, never put me out in the street. And still to this day, if you walk up to him and say, hey, who's Bernard to you? He won't say my stepson, he'll say my son. So he helped lead me as a man, going forward. And I admired that, as a young man. Bear with me 1 second. Let me get these girls to quiet down. But those are things that he was able to help, and developing me as a young man, and I appreciated it. But from that, I was a young man, and I looked at Christianity as definitely a blessing, and I developed a relationship, with God. Now, part of that relationship, I'll tell this little story, and I'll jump back here to where I'm at now. But I remember being about 9 years old. We had the FCAT that had just came out, and I really hadn't studied, really didn't know, much about it, had no real information on it. And I remember walking to the cafeteria, and I said, God, I said, if you help me pass this test, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. And my mom still to this story, and I try not to tear up on stuff like this, but she said, well, sometimes you'll forget the promise you made, but God will never forget the promise you made to him. And when I look at life now, I say, well, God, why do I go through so much? Why do I go through this? Why do I go through that? And I realized that it's not even for me. It's not just for me. And my mom, it's crazy you put up Jeremiah, because my mom always said I'm the weeping prophet. And it's funny those things happen, because I look at life and I said, I love Christianity, but I don't want to be a broke Christian. I don't think we should be broke Christians. So when I got into the world, after college, I got into a fight, got kicked out, and it was tough for me to even get back in colleges. And I'm like, bro, I put so much into track, fell in love with it, and now it's hard to get back in school. I actually got to get out in the work field. And I remember I put in 27 applications, and looked at my mom, and I said, somebody's going to hire me. Put the apps in. And I remember getting the jobs, working. And at the time, my parents, a little bit before, their home was going into foreclosure. And I'm working as a young man. Sorry, bro.
Take your time, man. Take your time.
Absolutely.
Take your time.
At that point, I'm working hard, saving my money, so that my parents never needed a place to stay. If they came and took our home, I would be able to help provide for my family. That's me at 19 years old. And I wanted to make sure my people was good. So when there was a bit of disconnect in my relationship with God was there, I didn't want to go to church all the time, being that consistent, and lose everything, and not have. So I would work. And when me and my mom would butt heads, when she would say, where's your time with God? I said, Mom, I talk to him. I deal with him. He knows me. He knows what's going on. And I just didn't want to ever fall victim to what they fell victim to. I've made a lot of money I'm only 28 years old. I've made a lot of money starting out in my career, but I never wanted to buy a home because my fear was that what happens if I foreclose on a home? My family has to go through that. At 16 years old, my parents called me in a room and said, hey, we got to let you know, your dad's lost his job. It was 2007, 2008. And I didn't really know what to think of it. But when I think about it now, it affected things that happened in sports. I wasn't able to give it my all. These are things that I consistently thought about, throughout school, throughout the year. And it left from there, man. And as I get into my work career, I start putting that before my relationship with God. And this is the thing I love most about God, man, is he's always going to pull you back. Man, the most loving person you can ever get a relationship with, no matter how much wrong you do, no matter how much you put him second, third, fourth, and fifth, always there, always there. He pulls me back. And I shared this with Nate in the past, situation happened at work. And I didn't take it as a stab that the individual say, yo, I said, BK had to jam into all types of music, you know what I mean? but it's your Christian brother. And I didn't take it light because I know that God has a calling on my life. I just always felt like I could circumvent the system and I can do it my way. And the reality is I realize now in my life that it's always going to be God's way. It's always. He's not going to let me slip and go far off. No matter how much success I have, he always put me in a place of humbling me. So I'll always be at his face and saying, God, I need you. Because without you, I'm nothing. And that's part of just what my time as a young Christian has been like, and experiencing all of those things. But I'll tell you this, man, for people that, we always say this, for people that are new to the faith, in the faith, and the backslide, don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed. Because the love that God has for you, when you're at your lowest point, will be greater than the individual that you just met that may like you only for your accolades. As I want to say, all state. Yeah, people like you there. But what happened when you get cut from an NFL team and your self-esteem may be down? Who's there for you? Yeah, when I catch the NFL contract, yeah, I know you're my friend now. You're supposed to be. By the coach and all, you're supposed to be. But when the money runs out, who's there? And I'll tell you, for anybody, God's always going to be there. Always. So if you feel a disconnect, it's not God. It's you. Because God's always in the same place.
Amen.
We just get further away from God. God's here, and we spread all the way around. But God's in the same place. Has no reason to move. He's what operates the world. He's what operates the job. He doesn't have to move. He doesn't have to drive a car. So if you're in those places to where, you struggle, or you don't know whether God is going to accept you back because you gave up on him, it's always going to be there. Give yourself an opportunity to get back with God and trust in him that he's always going to see you through. And as much success that I know that I'll have in the future, I don't want to have it without God. Y'all boys take it from here, bro.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that, man.
Amen.
Hey, dude, but just a few things to jump in there, man. First of all, BK, man, I appreciate you, man. Much love,
Absolutely.
brother. Much
Absolutely.
love, dude. Speaking your truth, dude, and being vulnerable, especially as a man, especially as a black man, and in society as a whole, is something not easy to do. And that's something that you guys have given me the opportunity to do. Just be who you are, and I love that, dude, and I appreciate that. So thank you, man. Seriously.
Absolutely.
You said something just now that I want to echo, dude. I believe, and I believe Christians believe as a whole. God is the Almighty. God is the All Powerful. God is everywhere. God is always present in every corner, in every nook, at all times. To your point, I think God is with us right now, and He always is. We get our eyes diluted by the world, and we stop seeing that. But at the same time, to your point, BK, since God has always been there, once we choose to put on our reflectors and live in a moment of clarity, God will always take you home, because God is the truth. God is the
Absolutely.
truth to the lies we try to tell ourselves. The truth is always the truth. You can't deny that. And one thing I'll also say is that, for me, and it's always a testament, and Hiawatha, you said it, you gave me some reassurance, and you gave me some hope. I'm 35 years old, and I feel now at 35, I have the best understanding and the best connection with my Creator than I had my entire life. Better than I was 30, certainly better than I was in my 20s, certainly better than 2 years ago, man. Who I am now as a man versus who I was 2 years ago, not even comparable. It's not even comparable. And that's just because of my relationship, with God. It always puts me right, and it always sets me right. And I look at my relationship with God as a reassurance. And I'll use an example of a book, and why faith is so important is that I can show you this book, and from your side, from your side of view, you'll say, there's nothing on the book. Why are you showing me a book with no color? Hey, BK, did you read this? And you're like, what did I read? What did you read this? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, for me, that's you're looking at it as a man with no faith, right? Because you need to have it, you need to have that finite answers. But
Preach.
God, God gives you the title, right? Now I can ask you the question, and you can make it make sense, right? And I think if you have that power, and I look at how I operate in business, BK, we shared a business meeting yesterday, and I look at some of the conversations that that go on around me, and I don't say this in a judgmental standpoint, but
Yeah.
since I'm in a completely different place from them, and I'm connected to my creator, I process information differently. When people are
Yeah.
saying things, I see it differently, and I also see why people who are not of faith like to condemn people who are of faith, because it makes you feel uncomfortable that I can't just sin. I can't just say these things. Somebody's going to hold me accountable.
Right.
Somebody's not going to go with it, right? You
Right.
have you have a group of people going with the grain of things that aren't good. To be honest with you, they're just not
Yeah.
good. Like, I'm almost shocked by some of the conversations, but I feel like, because of my relationship with my creator, it's my duty for my presence to be the difference, to not buy into that, to not disrespect or cause a reason why we're going to have any tension, but also make it very clear I don't agree with you. No, I'm on a completely different wavelength. I'm glad that you're happy, but I wish you would consider this. Okay, hey, have a good day.
Right.
But that's the peace of mind that it gives me. And I said this before on one of our conversations, to share with people. If you don't know who you are, you will be allowed you will allow society or anybody to define you, and you will go with the wind, and you will lose your sense of self as quickly as possible. When you have a strong connection with the creator, and you know who you are with your connection, and you know that you're on the path of finding out what you're supposed to do, and you're walking the right line, you have such an internal peace, that nobody can take it from you unless you're willingly giving it to them. There's no temptation, truthfully. There's no amount of money. There's no opportunity. You can't attack my ego. You can't attack my pride. You can't attack my greed. I have those feelings, but as we talked about with the seven deadly sins, I also know how to harness that energy, to use it for good and not to fall into the worldly demands. And I also can see when people are trying to use that energy to get me to do things that I don't want to do, things that aren't in line with my purpose, with my power, with my walk with my creator. And it gives you the protection. I had a friend tell me, and I said, I don't know what's been keeping me, paralyzed in certain ways, because I feel like, at certain things, when the world's pulling on me, I feel stuck at times. Like, man, I want to do X, Y, and Z, but I'm not doing it because of X, Y, and Z. And my friend told me, that's why, you have to continue to push forward. That's why we wear the armor of God on our front, not our backs. Because we turn our back to it, we're susceptible to attack. But if we're pushing forward, and we're pushing forward with the word, then we have the true protection of God. And I looked at that as a moment of reflection. Like, you're right. You can't be scared of people's reactions or what they want or their expectations. You have to be truly in line with your connection with your creator, and live your truth. And I feel that we all have a duty to share it. And again, there's so many people right now who are saying the complete opposite stuff that sounds good. They're talking about instant gratification. They're talking about the feel it now, enjoy it now benefits of the world. But here's the thing that everybody forgets, and this is the big thing. You guys, if my clock gets punched today, it doesn't matter how much is in my bank account. It's not coming with me. It's not coming with me. It's not coming with them either.
No, that's
So
right.
and the fact of the matter is, and BK, you said it, and this is so true. And this is what I look at, right? Here I am. I was in the company, top producer, blah blah blah. You get all the accolades. Everybody loves that. Yeah, you're great. You're great when you're doing what's good for them. But when you're doing what's good for you, you'll quickly see who's actually in your corner versus who's just using you. And I'm not saying that to be bad. I'm just saying it to be honest. But that goes back to the people who are living the worldly lies, right? Because if you're just doing everything for those hoorays, for those pat on the backs, for that good boy, and you're falling into that culture, the moment you're not doing that anymore is the moment you've lost your use to them, and you're done, you know. And the same goes for them. So the people who are living that life and they're making all that money, that's
Amen.
great. But this is not a sprint. This life is a marathon, and it continues past when my body stops working, right? So when that all goes away, so does all of that good feelings that they thought, and they'll have to deal with this day of reckoning too. I rather just deal with it while I'm on the right side of it and I can control it rather than it being forced on me and then I'm trying to fix my mistakes.
100%,
Amen.
100%. I'm glad you spoke on that, Nate. I don't know if you guys saw my post on Facebook yesterday, but it was Romans 12:18. It said, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So, going back to what Nate was kind of saying, sometimes when you have different clarity on the outside looking in, you're like, man, you can like literally see people doing certain things. You just like, but you just kind of have to, be at such and such peace. And I'll tell you guys a story I never shared with Nate, about Nate, in terms of when Nate and I first met, back in, I think it was 2018. But anyway, I always saw Nate as, the guy. Nate has always had phenomenal potential, and I
Yeah.
could, and God let me know. And this is before Nate and I really hadn't even gotten into any really, substance in terms of conversation. But God let me know certain things about certain people. When he let me know about Nate, was I knew that Nate was a man of God. Um, what I perceived from Nate at that particular time in our early relationship that we had was, Nate was guarded. Nate was very guarded. And the reason why Nate was guarded, in my opinion, is because there were some trust factors that Nate had gone through with different people. So he wasn't always just like open to necessarily everything. You know what I'm saying? He was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I've been through a couple things, you know what I'm saying? Let me slide in this thing a little slow. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna just
Yeah.
jump all the way in, because people don't show me some different things. So I can't just jump in the pool like that. I gotta,
Right.
which is warranted. So over the years, my relationship with Nate has come full circle. I mean, we've gotten way more closer, and that is a tribute to God Himself. Nate, even when we had the offices that were kind of splitting up and different things, and I think Nate even mentioned this a couple episodes ago. I would try to reach out to Nate. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew Nate had something there, and like Nate said, it was never about on no business stuff. It was just like, yo, man, how are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Because as a believer to another believer, I always had this sense that he had some things that were going on. I didn't ever pry, I never asked what those specific things were, but I just had that sense that he had something, that was going on, whatever that was. So, God was always putting it on my heart, like check in on Nate, check in on Nate, checking on Nate, make sure Nate is straight. You know what I'm saying? Because there was so much smoke screen going on from a company standpoint in terms of this, that. And I always kind of had this feeling that Nate was trying to discern who he should be rolling with. I felt like Nate was trying to discern, like, who can I really trust? You know what I'm saying? Can I trust Hiawatha? Should I trust these people over here? Should I go this route? Because like he just said, a top producer, $1 million producer, this, that, and the other, people saying, oh, rah, 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 all this type of stuff. And at sometimes I almost felt like, not that I felt like I needed to, but I wanted him to have an understanding that, like, yo, man, like, this is, to me, this is way deeper than than just some company stuff. Like, I'm really, like, for real, want this dude to be good. You know what I mean saying? And I never shared that story with Nate, but all that coming back to this full circle and how we even came to this podcast was really just me looking out for my brethren, because I've been in that situation where you got different things going on both sides of the table. You're like, what should I do? What should I do? And not necessarily
Right.
always having that true clarity of who you can trust and who you can kind of roll with. And at different times I kind of felt like Nate was kind of in that matrix of like, what I'm saying, he believes he knows the creator. I know I could see it. What I'm saying, God put that on me. I know he can see it, but there was something that was keeping him guarded. And I kind of felt like I wanted to kind of be that friend to him to say, yo man, like it's cool. What I'm saying? Like, I'm not even on like needing you for nothing like that. What I'm saying? I'm not trying to take
Yeah.
advantage of you. I'm not trying to do none of that. I'm just letting you know, like, yo man, if you need something, I'm here, just as a
Right.
friend. And
Yeah.
so, from that point, it's not like me and Nate talk every day or text every day or anything like that. But the whole point of the story is I just wanted you guys to have a fundamental understanding of like how God can put stuff together. Because in
Right.
terms of where we're at now in 2021 and even where we were at in 2020, and all three of us, I felt like our
Yeah.
relationship has immensely grown, uh, you know, definitely because of God, but I just think as a respect of each other individually in terms of our walk, our struggles, our this, our that. And I say that for viewers because it's not always going to be no cakewalk. And I know BK talked about it, what I'm saying? And you're going to need your good brethren who are got your back, who have the same mind, who are willing to do that Ephesians 6:11 to put on the whole armor of God. So what I'm saying is we're not designed to be on islands. We're designed to work together. That's how God has designed it. He's designed it to work together
Right.
because even though he doesn't have a quote unquote physical presence, it is required for us to have a physical presence, to help each other out and say, hey, yeah, I endorse that. That is what God said. Thanks for reminding me of that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I think that that is important, in addition to all of our testimonies. And I think we all have some phenomenal testimonies. And I know it's way deeper than what we shared, because, we have a certain amount of time. But I just wanted to go ahead and throw that out there. And same thing with BK. BK and I, we kind of met on, from a company standpoint, and
Yeah.
BK's first engagement or relationship with me, it was really from a distance. It was kind of like BK shared it, before. It was kind of like, hey, here's this guy who looks like me, who's another brother, who's a satellite, this, that, and the other. And his initial thoughts was like, okay, cool, I could do that because I see somebody like me that's doing it. You know what I mean? And all those things are huge and important. And I say that because it's really us, whether I look like you or you look like me, or if we don't look like each other. It's very important for us